In this video, we're going to look at 5 hot take swing states. States that I don't think are swing states yet, but I think could be swing states in the future. First of all, though, in order for this to qualify on this list, it has to actually be a genuine hot take. For example, after 2020, many were catching on and saying Texas could have been a swing state after Trump only won the state by 5.6 percentage points in a relatively close election. Granted, 2024 proved everyone wrong as Trump wound up winning the state by around 14 percentage points, but this is why, for example, a state like New Jersey, which Harris only won by 5.9 percentage points, now that people are starting to catch on to New Jersey being more competitive, especially after the 2021 gubernatorial election, where we saw the incumbent Democrat win by only 3 points in New Jersey. It's a thing where more people are catching on to New Jersey possibly being a swing state, so it can't count for this list. No, these have to be genuine hot takes. However, number 5 on my list is a state that I think could potentially be a swing state in the future, but and the first state I think on this list that I think it genuinely could be is Nebraska. And not specifically Nebraska, but the first congressional district. Comparing past elections, there was only one electoral vote between 2020 and 2024 that got bluer. Nebraska's first district, Harris made a 1.9 percentage point gain. Since 2016, her gains in the district have been 7.7 percentage points. And, she's been really just making quite a few gains in that district. 2008, this district was decided by single digits. Now, granted, this was during Obama's landslide victory, where even Indiana went for a Democratic candidate. We also saw states like Montana, North Dakota, and South Dakota be close. Nonetheless, though, Nebraska's first district then solidified itself back up in 2012 and looked solid in 2016 as well. But you go to 2020 and Trump only won by 14.9 and you don't really bat an eye. But now it's down to 13.0. So it was close in states like Iowa and Florida, states that used to be considered swing states. I think that Nebraska's first district could be in play. I don't think the state as a whole is going to really be in play because going back to, starting in 1964, the only time the state was less than a, 15% margin of victory was in 2008, and even then it was 14.9 percentage points of a win by McCain. Nonetheless, I do think that that the first district could possibly be in play for Democrats at some point, which would mean that Republicans would only win 3 electoral votes out of Nebraska, not 4. Now, Kansas is another state that I think could be a swing state. Kansas is odd because it hasn't voted for the Democrats since 1964, obviously in Johnson's landslide, but it's gotten close a few times. 1976, Ford only won the state by 7.6 percentage points. 1988, Bush won Kansas by 13.2 points, which isn't close, but it actually only pushed the state around 5 percentage points more of Republican than the nation at large in the midst of Bush's 1988 landslide. Kansas wasn't actually that far to the right, and this was possibly because of the farm crisis that made Iowa one of the bluest states in the country and pushed traditionally Republican states like South Dakota and Montana to be to the left of the nation at large, which in both cases very rarely happens, but there was a farm crisis that also hurt Bush in Kansas. And then 92, it's down to 5.1 percentage points. But since 1996, it had always been within 15 points until 2008 when it was 15% point margin for McCain exactly. but actually really 14.96, and Obama had 41.65% of the vote. That was the best that a Democrat had gotten in Kansas, percentage-wise, since 1988, during the farm crisis. Because in 1992, the vote was split. And Perot took a significant amount of the vote in Kansas, even winning Jefferson County and Wabanoosie County, and tying with Bush in Morse County. And then in 2020, we see Kansas get down to 14.6%. Biden's percentage is slightly worse because of Joe Jorgensen's 2% of the vote in Kansas. And while Kansas solidified itself, it also barely shifted. It's only 16.1% for Trump. So you have to really look at Kansas as a state that used to be solid Republican, but now it's getting a little bit dicier for the GOP. And again, for hot takes, I think that this comes in at number 4. Most of these states, by the way, are going to be Republican. Another one that's maybe not so much of a hot take, but I think is still a bit of a hot take, is Alaska. I think Alaska is a state that possibly could be in this trajectory. And the reason why I say that is because you look at 2020, and Trump only wins by 10 percentage points in Alaska. That was the closest that Alaska had been since 1992, when Bush won 9.2% of the vote there. But notice the vote was split 3 ways again. Clinton got 30.29% of the vote. Since then, Democrats had not really fared very well in the state of Alaska. As you can see by going through this map, it's been like Republican landslide after Republican landslide. And then 2012, things change. The state shifts to the left by a considerable amount, 7.5 percentage points. Obama actually cracks 40% of the vote. That hadn't happened in a while. And since then, it's been in that same column where, sure, 2016, they regressed, but so did the Republicans. And in 2020, Biden gets 42.77% of the vote. Granted, Kamala did worse, and the state shifted 3% of the Republicans. But Alaska is not out of play at all. And I think what's even a hotter take is Utah. Now, Utah, obviously, if we said this in 2012, you'd be looking at me like I was crazy, as Romney won the state by 48 percentage points. And indeed, it's been solid Republican in every election going back to 1964. Though what's interesting is that the last time that a Republican won Utah close, it was 1960 when Nixon won a state by 9.6 percentage points. Compare that to Nebraska, where the last time that a Republican won in Nebraska, but it was less than 14 points, you got to go back to 1948 when Truman had a strong presence in the Midwest and the West. In any case, though, 2016, the state, Romney wins 48% of the vote, about a 40% margin. 2016, Clinton improves on that amidst McMullen's strong candidacy that gets him 21% of the vote. Trump only wins Utah by 18.1 percentage points. It's the closest it's been against a Democrat since 1964. I get that 1992 was closer at 16 points, but Bush's margin over Clinton was around 19 points. And again, the vote was split multiple ways. Obviously, you look at 2016 at first and you realize that Clinton only got about 28% of the vote, and that many of the Trump voters voted for McMullen. 2020, though, the state takes a hard turn to the left as it's 20.5% margin for Trump. Biden wins 38% of the vote in Utah. That's very good for a Democrat in Utah. And in 2024, it's not really that much better for Republicans. I could very well see Utah being a state that within 30 or 40 years is back to its swing state roots that it was, looking back at 1960. And there are 2 Democratic states I think are hot takes, Rhode Island and New York. That being said, I think that New York is a better example, seeing as this was seen as one of the most solid Democratic states in the country. Even in 2004, when only 4 states, New York, Vermont, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, went solid Democrat, New York was one of them. And when Bush won in 2000, Gore won the state by 25 percentage points, as New York was the third bluest state in the country. 2020, 23-point win for Biden, and it's 23 points for Clinton in 2016 as well. Even Rhode Island had already gotten a bit closer. Then look at 2024. Rhode Island's 13.8 share, but that was still in the bluest states. But New York is no longer one of the 10 bluest states in the country, and the margin of victory for Harris is only 12.6 percentage points. For the first time since 1992, a Democrat is held to under 58% of the vote in New York. This is very substantial. You look at 2012 as more proof. Obama wins the state by 28 percentage points, 63 to 35. 96, Clinton wins the state by 29 points, as New York is again the third bluest state in the country, and Dole is held to almost 30% of the vote, as Clinton takes about 60. Yet now we're living in a reality where New York is losing a lot of voters, and a lot of those voters they're losing are Democrats. This is why states like Georgia, Texas, Arizona, and North Carolina, as well as Virginia especially, have swung to the left. However, it's pushing New York to the right, and it's not totally out of play. As even more proof, you look at the gubernatorial election in 2022, Rhode Island was safe for McKee. Hochul only won New York by 6.4%. New York in a governor race voted to the left of several other traditionally swing states, such as Pennsylvania, Michigan, Maine, Minnesota, and even New Mexico by a slight bit. New York is in play for the Republicans in 2026, and this is honestly a reason why.